Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Darby Coughlin, and I am the events coordinator at APMP, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's APMP sponsored webinar. We're excited to present the topic, Demystifying Prompt Engineering, Best Practices for Proposal Professionals. APMP webinars are always free for members, and we aim to keep them unbiased so you can apply what you learn immediately without the need to purchase anything specific. Occasionally, we feature tech solutions that our members are interested in learning more about. While APMP remains neutral, we offer sponsored webinars where vendors can present their products, services, or ideas. These sessions may include things like product demos or highlights of the vendor services. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you that today's session is being recorded. The recording will be available on APMP TV shortly after the live session. And while you are here, we also encourage you to explore our library of past webinars, all of which are featured free for APMP members. As you think of questions during the presentation today, please feel free to submit them using the question icon located at the bottom right of your video player. We will do our best to address them at some point during the webinar. Finally, by registering for this webinar, you'll receive a follow-up email with our feedback survey and any resources our speaker would like to share with you. All right, I think we're ready to get started. It is my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, Allison Ritz, Director of Product Marketing at VisibleThread. Take it away, Allison.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for today's session. My name is Allison Ritz. Oh, excuse me. Sorry about that. My name is Allison Ritz, and I'm the Director of Product Marketing at VisibleThread. So my experience is in strategic account management, software adoption, and change management. So I'm constantly encouraged and excited by the ways that our industry is embracing emerging technologies. And I'm really happy to be here today to talk about prompting. So the goal of today's session is to understand the building blocks for effective prompting, learn more about effectively communicating with the LLM, and to discuss use cases and considerations when leveraging generative AI. So to give you an idea of what you should expect out of the session, let's take a look at the agenda. So first, we're going to cover the basics. So how does an LLM work and how can you best communicate to get optimal results? So we'll review our goals of the session and then move on to prompting. So in session 2, we'll talk about the key elements of an effective prompt. So these building blocks will create a foundation for creating content that'll be relevant for multiple use cases. So we'll also look at what every prompt should contain and a few examples on how to add context to a prompt to get more robust and relevant results. So then we'll move on to how to communicate with your LLM to iterate and develop content. Prompting is generally not a one-shot effort. So good content is created through a working conversation. We'll, of course, cover potential pitfalls and areas for consideration for both practitioners and organizations when incorporating AI into your workflows. And then last, we'll leave some time for questions. So I'll answer any and all that we have time for, and of course, follow up after the session on any unanswered questions or just to connect. So our first section, kind of what is prompt engineering? So in this section, we'll pull back the curtain a little bit on how an LLM makes decisions and define prompt engineering. So in order to effectively understand, excuse me, how an LLM generates content, we need to look at what a large language model is and how it functions. So I'm not looking to get too far into the weeds on this or get in over my head, but I do think that it's helpful to understand how an LLM makes decisions and where that information is coming from. So I'm going to highlight some of these to break it down a little bit. So data training. So LLMs train on massive sets of data. So trained on a diverse text of sources, so books, articles, websites, etc. So a lot of information to help the model learn grammar, facts, reasoning, and content from all of that information. So I'm going to jump down to 3 to tokenization. So that text is then broken down into smaller chunks called tokens. So words, subwords, characters. These tokens are converted into numerical representations in order to be searched and identified. So on number 4, prediction and generation. So when given an input, the model predicts the most likely next word or sentence. So it selects the next token. So as previously discussed, words, subwords, characters, based on probabilities from its data training. So fine tuning, some models are fine-tuned and optimized on specific tasks or specific industries. Companies may have their own LLM that's trained on their information. So depending on the situation, whether you're using a large-scale open source model, something that is industry specific, or something that is trained directly for you, that is going to affect the type of output that you're going to receive. And then you just awareness and limitation. So the model remembers the context within a conversation, but in a fixed way. So it does have limitations there. So it doesn't have a true understanding or consciousness. It predicts based on patterns. It's not capable of logic. So the more we understand the science of how an LLM makes choices, the better we can work to structure prompts to leverage the platform most effectively and create content that's more relevant, but use the way that the LLM functions to our advantage. Okay, so, what is prompt engineering? So prompt engineering is the combined art and science of crafting proper instructions for generative AI tools to produce desired outcomes. So it's really the key that unlocks all of the data and information contained within the large language model. So the prompt serves as the kind of roadmap on the journey to generating and iterating relevant content. Oh, prompting should be treated like a dialogue with a highly capable digital assistant. So for them to comply with your requests and provide the output that you're looking for, you need to provide specific guidelines, direct instructions, and all of the information needed to perform the task successfully. So a comprehensive understanding of AI's limitations and the structure to guide the tools toward accurate and relevant responses will ensure the best results. So as we just discussed, content generation is based on prediction, not logic. So by understanding limitations, we can apply technology to the correct job and structure our prompts to leverage the LLM's capabilities most effectively. So for instance, using LLM to create first draft content, edit, summarize, outline are excellent ways to leverage the technology. So however, upon official or upon kind of initial use of these types of platforms, people report kind of varying levels of satisfaction. So most of the time, a less than stellar output is a direct result of poorly designed prompts. So GenAI can help you work more efficiently by generating insights, ideas, and content. However, the quality of the outputs is directly related to the quality of the prompt. So well-structured requests with context examples, personas, and other details is more likely to deliver a quality outcome than a prompt that's more vague and simple. So the prompt is the first step on the journey, and the first step to understanding the key elements of a quality prompt will set you up for success and help to avoid you kind of veering off the trail on the journey. So like I said, the foundation is important. So in this section, we'll discuss key elements of creating an effective prompt. So these are the tools that you need to ensure success on your content creation journey. So one of the biggest misconceptions that I think accompanied the GenAI boom was the idea that this technology is a silver bullet. So the idea that you can pull up a generative platform and simply ask for a proposal response to be created, click the button, sit back, watch the magic happen. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So leveraging these platforms for content creation is like so many tech tools that have come before and that we're leveraging right now. There's skill, practice, education, and trial error involved. So it's not a quick fix, but it is a valuable piece of the puzzle if it is leveraged effectively. So getting into what makes an effective prompt. So the first thing that you must do is give the model clear and specific instructions. So much like our adventurer who we saw set off on her journey in the previous slide, the key to reaching the destination successfully is understanding directions. So think about communicating with the LLM like you would if you were trying to make sure a friend didn't get lost in the woods. Without clear directions, it would be easy to get completely off track. So as we discussed earlier, an LLM contains information from millions of sources. So it's easy to get answers that are irrelevant and off topic if you don't give clear directions. So be specific, communicate only what is essential and is relevant to the task at hand. So avoid ambiguity and put yourself in the shoes of your digital assistant. So with no context, are the directions that you're giving easy to follow? Where are there areas of potential confusion? Are there things that you can do or context that you can provide that can close that gap? Ultimately, what can you do to simplify and ask the question in a concise and clear way? So in addition to being clear, make sure that we are applying the needed context. So do you have specific needs for formatting or length? Add that context to the prompt. Instead of asking the model to create a summary, ask the model to create a summary with a title, intro paragraph, and 3 subheadings. So if you have specific needs when it comes to word count or length, supply those details. Now, like I said, GenAI is not magic, so you may not get exact numbers, but you will have a quality first draft that's much closer to what you envisioned if you provide proper context. So providing an appropriate amount of detail about the content you want to generate, and don't ask general questions. So for example, instead of asking the LLM, tell me about the Army map solicitation, ask us to explain the evaluation criteria and past performance requirements for the Army map solicitation. So while the latter is still a bit general, we could do a bit better there. It is asking for specific information, the evaluation criteria and past performance requirements. Additionally, be sure to give instructions on the level of analysis. Are you looking for a summary? Are you looking for an overview? Do you want an in-depth analysis on a certain subject? The more that you can give, the better that outcome is going to be. And the context and parameters are, the map that you're drawing for the system when you're looking at crafting your content. And then, we want to consider style and tone. So we have content, we have context, but adding instructions on style and tone give the model the tools and additional resources needed to generate the most relevant content possible. So is there a specific tone that is preferred by your organization? Include that. Is there a specific tone that's preferred by the customer? Include that. Is there a specific customer language that needs to be considered? Again, that can be part of your instruction. Active versus passive voice can be considered. Also, the structure of your prompt can determine the tone of the responses. So open-ended questions for more creative responses versus specific questions to receive factual answers. So for example, when looking at, seeking various ideas, you could use open-ended questions like, what are some creative ways for proposal teams to improve time management? But if you needed a precise answer on a precise topic, you'd want to frame that question accordingly, such as, how many prime contractors were awarded on the CIO SP4 IDIQ? Very different questions for very different situations, but also when we're looking for firm answers versus something that may be more open-ended or thought-provoking, we can structure those questions accordingly. And then lastly, as part of our foundation, we want to consider the audience. So is this a white paper? Is this a proposal to be evaluated? Is this private or public sector opportunity? So who's the awarding agency? On and on and on. So the answer to those questions are going to shape the tone and style of the content created by your proposal writers. That tone can be adopted, at least to a certain extent, by an LLM to assist. So the information can be added to a prompt as well as referenced from your database, and we'll discuss that a bit later, but there are a few different ways that we can add that context and consider the audience. Additionally, assigning personas to the prompt will shape tone and style. So creating scenario-based prompts in which the LLM takes a specific role is a way to guide tone and style. Overall, prompts that focus on context, content, style, tone, and your audience will help to create much more effective and relevant drafts. And these will take writers off the blank page and jumpstart the review cycle. So we talked a lot about different information and context that can be included, but regardless of your desired output and regardless of the complexity of the ask, the base framework of a prompt is the same. In the simplest terms, a good prompt should do at least these three things: contain a task or question for the AI to perform, frame the context of your request, and give any relevant detail or constraints that the AI needs to create the most relevant output. So using this as a baseline, you can factor in all the best practices we just discussed in the previous section. Additionally, you can build upon this for more complex asks, more complex tasks. But having this as a baseline, and can your prompt answer these questions? Does it contain these three things in some capacity? Means you're on the right track. So, with that in mind, let's look at an example of how we can add context to a prompt to make it more effective. So I created a prompt, and we're going to look at a couple different iterations on how we can continue to add context and add information to create a more relevant output. So in this instance, say we're the contractor responsible for maintaining the Beaver Valley nuclear power station. We must create ongoing audit reports as part of our contract to support safety and emergency preparedness. So I'm using this as an example to demonstrate prompt components and iteration. However, regardless of the use case, this process and the building blocks contained within are the same. If I was bidding on this contract instead of delivering on it, I would use this same workflow to develop content, expand content, and refine my results. So looking at the initial prompt, so create an audit report on the safety of the Beaver Valley Power Station in Beaver County, Pennsylvania. So in this example, I did give an instruction, create an audit report, and some context, the location of the facility. But there's a lot of additional framing and enhancing that can be done here. So I can improve this prompt and increase the kind of quality and relevance of the response we're going to get. So take it a step further, and we'll give an audience. Front half is still the same. Still gave the instruction, gave the context, but I've added some relevant details. So the recipient of this report will be the Department of Energy. So this is better. So we can factor in the preferences of the requesting agency, but again, we can continue to enhance. So I can add what I would like the focus to be. So we are still creating an audit report. The recipient is the Department of Energy, but here the report must focus on safety, quality, downtime, and environmental risk mitigation. So this edition, we've added specific areas of focus for the LLM to expand upon and highlighted that these are going to be key pieces in our audit and key things that we need to discuss. Again, we'll take kind of one last look at it and say we can further specify by adding context on what I'd like the output to look like. So this is really important because without context on formatting, length, style, presentation, the LLM is going to make those decisions for you, and you may get a very, very different response or a very, very different piece of content than you were envisioning in your head. So everything that came previously is there. So we are then adding that the response must have headings for each focus and be less than 2,500 words. So we've given length parameters as well as structural parameters. So this is an example of how we can add the formatting information and enhance the output for this specific task. So the important thing to notice here is that we're adding new elements to the prompt, but the base ask is the same. The base ask is we are creating this audit report. So we're not pulling a bunch of different things in. I think that sometimes when people are new to prompting or new to expanding upon basic prompts, they think that this is overcomplication. Think about the ideas being the same. So we want to create an audit report on the safety of the power station. We are still doing that. That's still the end game, but we've added all of these parameters to improve the quality of the response. So how do we effectively communicate with our LLM? So we've talked about what an effective prompt contains. Now let's move on to putting that into practice. So another common kind of misconception or pitfall that people have is that prompting is a one-shot effort, that you're going to go in, create either a magic prompt or create something very simple that will give you a complex result. And overwhelmingly, like I said earlier, that is not the case, especially for multifaceted asks, or more complex end results. So our initial creation prompt should be seen as the beginning of a conversation, especially when creating more complex content. So the initial prompt is just your opening. Here in this next section, we'll discuss how to effectively communicate with your LLM to iterate content, as well as ways that you can reference resource materials or reference different pieces of your documents to enhance quality and be more specific on things that we want to expand or work through. So we have the tools for a successful journey. So let's set off on our adventure and put them to use. So number one, the biggest thing that I'll focus on is plan to iterate. I think when I work with folks that are new to prompting and maybe not necessarily new to prompting, they've played with ChatGPT or they have created some kind of content before, but it might be in a different capacity. It might be in a more casual capacity or asks that aren't quite as complex. The idea that people have is that they should be able to ask a question and get a response that's pretty close to what they're looking for. So you need to be prepared to iterate, because like we've said already, that most often, particularly when you're dealing with the type of documentation you're working through in the proposal response process, in delivery processes, in the overall kind of RFP lifecycle, that content and those documents are going to be a bit more complicated. And there is going to be a back and forth involved in getting an output that's going to help. So looking at utility prompts are a really great way to take a source piece of content and begin to shape it into something that is more useful and more relevant. So these are just a few, but just give an idea of what that looks like. So simplification, reducing complexity, addressing structure, expanding on topics, tone, word counts. And like I said, that's just a handful, but there are all kinds of utility or editing prompts that we can use to work through content that you've created. So I'm going to show you an example. So we took our prompt that we were working on previously, and we're going to begin to iterate on that. So this is our prompt that we ended in our last section. We are creating an audit report on the safety of the Beard Valley Power Station. We have our context here for our recipient, our focus, and then our structure. So I'm using, just for everybody's awareness, I'm using screenshots from the VisibleThread platform to demonstrate what the content creation iteration process looks like in practice. So here I've entered my prompt from our previous example, and I'm sourcing information from the LLM to generate a first draft of our audit report. So just for your orientation and awareness, for those that haven't seen this platform before, the toolbar on the far left is to toggle between different functions. The prompt list that you're seeing here is my prompt library and my workflow shortcuts. And then just above the prompt list here, you see these two modes. We are in creator mode. That is where we're going to spend the majority of our time, because scoring mode deals with the quality and consistency of content once it's been created. So I've entered my prompt and I'm asking the LLM to create this document. So moving on. So here you see that I have run my prompt and created my initial document. So the elements that I have highlighted are included, and the word count is highlighted there as well. So I asked for specific headings on safety, quality, downtime, environmental risk mitigation. I'm seeing that. I'm also seeing my word count here. I asked for 2,500. We've come in at 2,498, just to give me an overall view of what has been created. So this is the document that I asked for, but looking at this, I know that it needs to be more detailed and we need to expand on some of the information. So what do? We're going to begin to shape the content and begin the working session with our LLM. So downtime was one of my highlighted sections, and you see here that we've highlighted this section in downtime. So downtime was one of my highlighted sections, and looking at the results, I know that I'll need more information on downtime, specifically the root cause analysis for unplanned outages. So I've selected that content in the document, and I'm referencing that to run a selection-based prompt. If we look here in my chat box, what you'll see is that information that I highlighted is here. So section 5.1 and 5.2 are here. And I've selected this icon, which means that I'm running a selection-based prompt. So in a selection-based prompt, I am using just the highlighted sections or the selected text as reference for the prompt that I'm including. So this is a really great way to isolate parts of a document that you want to expand upon, that you want to adjust, and leave other pieces as is. So to work through specific areas to get your kind of optimum result. So I'm going to flip on to my next, and then I have run that prompt. So the prompt was, I was asking the system to expand on our information on unplanned outages, particularly sections on root causes. So I've run the prompt and the information has been expanded as requested. I have more specific information on hours and duration, on reasons, and on some of the excuse me, on some of the timeframes and what was happening within each unit. So I do get a summary. The expected downtime section now provides numbers, details, and root cause analysis, as well as how my word count has been affected, because that was something that was important to me the last time around. So what I can do is the last step, which is inserting the expanded sections into my document. So as requested, the information has been added, and we have additional analysis on root cause for unplanned outages. This content gives us a much better picture of the actual performance and issues of the plant during this time period. Again, expand and iteration is a utility prompt, just one of many examples. We can use these things for, complexity reduction, structure, expand. Obviously, we just expanded on a topic, but changing tone, word counts, there are a lot of different things that we can do here during that editing process to leverage the LLM in that capacity. So this back and forth conversation is really how you shape content and produce more effective outcomes. So referencing our source material. So along with all of the information contained within the LLM, your database can be leveraged for more relevant and comprehensive results. So my last example was just one way that you can leverage documents and folders to shape your content in a meaningful way. So the example that I'm going to show will continue from our last prompt, but your documentation can be referenced at any point in time from the content creation process, as we're talking about here on the screen. So I could have chosen to factor in my prior audits and facility reports from running our initial prompt. So this can be done at any point in time. We are picking up where we left off for this next example, and this is particularly helpful when creating RFP sections, writing technical volumes, referencing past performance, contractual documentation, much more. So on the screen, you'll see some examples of where this can be used and what types of files can be referenced. So we can do this, like I said, in the initial content creation phase, in the iteration, whether we're using selection-based prompting, we can use native files, SharePoints, collections of documents, and on and on and on. So there are a lot of different ways that we can use our source material along with all of the information contained within the LLM to create our highest quality and most relevant responses. So just like was shown in our last example, we will see document reference and where we're sourcing our content. And I'll show a quick example of that now. Okay, so same document, the same place that we're continuing to work. So we worked from our original prompt, we expanded upon our downtime section, and now we're taking a look at the safety section. So the safety section has been highlighted because we know in this case that we need to add sections for emergency preparedness and reactor safety. So this information we know is documented in our database. So I want to reference the emergency response plan for content. So here we see in our highlighted section the prompt that we're working from. So expanding the safety section, adding subheadings for reactor safety and emergency preparedness. Okay. So I created that expansion prompt and I'm using the collection of relevant documents that I have identified. So previously we were doing a selection-based prompt that we saw highlighted in this little box here. So that was saying, okay, we're using a selection from the document we created to expand upon. Here we've clicked on the use files section. So when I select use files, this box will pop up. I have the option to select local files, SharePoint, collections. I did create a collection for this example because emergency preparedness plans are publicly available through the Nuclear Regulatory Committee. So I am using the appropriate documents here for this example just to show you what that looks like in practice. But I also have the option, if there are other specific documentation that I wanted to pull from SharePoint, I could do that as well. So there are a lot of different ways that you can pull in relevant documentation. So for this, I'm going to select this collection and move to create content. So what we'll see here is that the expand prompt is still there. We're dealing with our safety section, but we are basing this on this collection. So previously, where we were basing it on the original content that was created in the downtime section, here we're basing it on those collection of documents. So I've asked for an expansion on the safety section, and the model will respond to my prompt using these source documents as reference. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next. And we see that the content generated has been pulled from the noted sources. So when you're referencing local or SharePoint files, the content generated will have reference information to identify to the writer where that information has been pulled. So it's an excellent way to reference policy, past performance, technical information, contractual policies, and on, and then insert them directly into your newly created documents. So these are only a couple of examples, but they do a good job of showing how the combination of quality prompts, iteration, and then communication with the LLM can help to shape content and make it useful more quickly to get you to a point of action and a point of relevance more quickly. So talking about potential pitfalls, with the sun comes shadows or something like that that's written on a sign in my bathroom. By that I mean, with all the wonderful things that generative AI can do, there are always things to keep in mind and things to watch out for as you're leveraging this type of technology or any emerging technology or AI that you are incorporating into your process. So, like our adventure, the journey can go sideways pretty quickly if we aren't prepared. So I want to help you to anticipate potential issues and be aware of potential risks. So Awareness of security risks. So in the proposal space, particularly with so many of you dealing with CUI, PII, proprietary data, and on and on, security will always be a top priority. So it's important to know your company's policy on AI. Also, to continue to stay updated on guidance from the government on what types of technology can be used to produce proposals in the public sector. Things are changing quickly, and we want to make sure that everyone is using these tools responsibly and not putting any of their information at risk. Additionally, when considering platforms, make sure to work with vendors who have experience and successful customers at your security level. So have developed solutions that have, whether it be ability to deploy into secure environments, whether it be ability to be hosted on premise behind firewalls, whether it be secure cloud, whatever that looks like and whatever is the best fit for you, make sure that that is something that the vendor that you're working with offers and it fits into your security posture. And then, AI hallucinations. Now, everybody knows about hallucinations and we've talked kind of at length about how to trust the platform, what we can't do. So as GenAI continues to evolve and become more and more accurate, it's important to keep in mind that this technology is not a replacement for a proposal writer, a SME, an editor. LLMs can be very good at being convincingly wrong. Generated content is best leveraged in early drafts as a part of competitive analysis, positioning, in some other areas. But it is excellent for starting the conversation, but as we saw, it does require shaping to get to a final submittable product. And then one of the biggest things to consider, and I'll pause for my AI images that I've used throughout my presentation. This one was my favorite because when I asked for an adjustment on this scary mountain lion, they gave me this. And I said, for me, this would probably be the most dangerous thing in the forest because he looks so cute that I would be tricked immediately. So anyway, back to the topic. Using GenAI appropriately. So while powerful, GenAI is not built for all jobs. Again, it's not a silver bullet. Things like compliance reviews, contract clause management, risk assessment, management of acronyms, they aren't really good fits. So these are processes that have no room for error, must be trackable, must be repeatable. GenAI is more suited for creative tasks and as a supplemental technology for others. So if you think about these things when you are applying tech to a process within your workflow, think about what you need. Do I need an output that's 100% accurate? Do I need a process that's 100% repeatable? Do I need to understand where the information is coming from? Or do I need to understand the logic that created this response? If the answer to any of those is yes, GenAI and leveraging an LLM may not be the correct fit. So a combination of technologies, depending on the job at hand, is generally kind of the best path forward for most of our customers, but for most of the folks that we work with in the proposal industry. Okay, so talking about kind of final takeaways. So what do we know after this conversation about generative AI? Really thinking about the most appropriate use cases and the most appropriate way to leverage the platforms. So looking at the ability to create prompts with the correct building blocks that we can then iterate on and build from. So creating a foundation is the first step, and then learning how to take that foundational content that you've created, iterate on it, develop it within that back and forth communication with the LLM. So, we want to help you to master the key elements of a prompt. So use the foundational information to experiment with your own prompts. So once you've mastered some of the key elements, you can continue to iterate on prompts for a variety of use cases. So whether those be, proposal content creation, whether those be, competitive assessment or solution assessment, market assessment, there are a lot of different things that you can do with generative AI, with an LLM, and a lot of different areas that it can fit into the process. Great for creative tasks. Just look at where are our baselines, how can we build on those things, and how can you continue to create prompts that are going to benefit your teams and your organization. So with that, knowing when generative AI is the right fit, like we said, if you're looking at processes that have no room for error, that need to be 100% repeatable, that need to have some sort of tracing on the logic that was used, that generally isn't the right fit for GenAI. But if you're looking at creating content, doing different types of assessment, beginning a conversation around positioning, those are really, really great use cases and excellent ways to kind of flex the muscles of a large language model. So always using technology responsibly and ethically. So looking at what is the policy of your company, looking at what is the policy of your customers, and then your contractual obligations and moral obligations around the handling of other folks' information. So understand what the systems are connecting to, understand where you are, uploading this information or accessing information. So make sure that we are using the technology responsibly and to the best of its ability. Always be ready to iterate. So be ready to make changes and ready to work and mold the content as you create it. So work really hard on creating foundational prompts that you can work and adjust, and then take that content and help to shape it into what you want to see. And then breaking up large projects and proposals into bite-sized chunks of creation. We said a couple times today that one-shot prompting, particularly in this industry, is not going to be relevant very often. So if we're looking at creating an RFP response or creating an outline or an executive summary or something like that, we can't just ask the LLM to create and give some context and create an executive summary or create a response to this solicitation. There will be a lot of gaps and a lot of places where we need to fill in. So breaking up those large projects or proposals into bite-sized chunks or creation. So specific volumes, specific sections, specific information around delivery items or solutions. We can break those up and use the LLM as a sum of its parts, kind of. So we can leverage it in different areas and then grow into this larger proposal. So learning how to chunk out some of the larger work to come up with content that's going to be usable and helpful for the team. And then continue to build your library of effective prompts. So find prompts that have a great foundation that you can change a couple elements of and use in different areas. Find prompts that are giving, pretty consistent results. Like we said, the LLM is not repeatable, but you can get better at creating prompts that are going to give you good starting points. So when you find those things that work for you and your use case, keep track of those. Use them in different situations. Don't be afraid to experiment and really just make the most out of using generative AI and have fun with it, because there are a lot of different things that you can do, a lot of interesting ways that you can leverage the technology. So looking at, the end, just like our adventure, successfully reaching the end of the journey, effectively leveraging GenAI can be a huge win when it comes to creating compelling content officially. And I will stop there and open to questions. And thank you all.
Wonderful. Allison, thank you so much. We do have several questions here from our attendees. Just a reminder to all that are watching, you could still submit your questions by using the question icon located at the bottom right of your video player. All right, Allison, Are the essential parts of a prompt dependent on a specific use case? And can I apply these same principles to general LLM use?
Yes. Yes, you can, and no, they are not. So the essential parts of a prompt are not going to be specific to one use case. So it isn't like there's certain ones that you need context for and other you don't. Now, what that is may change. So in our example, we showed specific things we wanted to highlight in our audit report and specific information we wanted to contain in the parameters within. However, that idea, those baseline of those three pieces of every prompt needs to contain these three things at some level, that is universal.
Wonderful, thank you. And when communicating with the LLM on changes to my content, how specific do I need to be? Is it possible to be overly specific?
It could be. The general rule is that, the more information, the better, as far as, context and parameters and different things that you're giving instructions for when you're looking at what do I want in my response. So then if we're talking about content that we want to be highlighted, things that we want to be included, any specific kind of data sets that we want to be included, things that you want to consider. But there is a tipping point. That's why iteration is so important. So instead of really overloading, and that's just a trial and error process. So just trying different prompts and trying different things to see, does making a more complex front end prompt give me a better result, or pulling back on a little bit of that context and then iterating some of the responses that I get, is that a better workflow for me? So it is trial and error, but the answer is yes. At some point, the technology can get a little bit confused, or you can muddy the water. So I would say it's just a trial and error process to see where you're getting the best results.
Right. Okay. Similar type of question. How do you get the LLM to eliminate content you don't want because it's not relevant, old, or known to be inaccurate?
So that's going to depend on a couple different things. It's going to depend on the LLM that you are using, but generally an LLM is baked, as they will say. So it is created. It is not kind of openly sourcing information until a new version comes out. So we have ChatGPT 3.0, 4.0, and you're going to move through different versions of the LLM, whatever LLM you're using, whether that is one in your company, something open sourced, wherever this is coming from, it is something that's created, and the information that's in there is kind of in there. So the answer to that would be, it would be updating, either whether it is a proprietary LLM, updating the information, or doing a retrain. In the other sections, it would be updating to a new version. So if you're using, a Llama or a Mistral or a GPT, updating to the most recent version, or seeking out an LLM that is more suited for your use case. Like I said in the beginning, there are LLMs that are created with specific industries in mind, with specific types of content in mind. So right now there are so many different things that are available, and the need for platforms like VisibleThread, that we have an interface to leverage an LLM, the need for platforms like ours to be LLM agnostic continues to grow, which just means that you have the interface to leverage the LLM, and then you can attach it to any large language model that's best suited for you. So long answer is that there is not a way to just eliminate certain types or ignore certain types of information within an LLM. But if you are working within a particular LLM, and that is happening quite frequently, so the answers that you're getting are not necessarily relevant, excuse me, the first place I would start is obviously optimizing your prompting and working on prompt engineering. If that isn't fixing the issue, then it would be, look at, is there an LLM that's better suited for this work case for me?
Wonderful. Thanks, Allison. And what's your recommendation for adjusting prompting to help avoid AI hallucinations? Do you check the output along the way or wait until you get closer to the final product?
I would say you would check along the way. So at every step, if you are creating kind of like what we were doing today. If I am going to expand on a section and I want to expand on something and I want you to give me more context on, you know, information about downtime of these this nuclear power plant. I want you to expand on that, and I'm looking at the content that's created, and you want to check to make sure, to the best of your knowledge, that that is accurate, that the responses that you're getting are accurate. Because then if not, you can reframe the way that you're asking the question. You can reframe the way that you're approaching. So I don't think, depending on the number of iterations that you have and the size of the document, it would, that may vary, but I would say as you're going along the way, you need to be aware of the content you're creating and if you are experiencing hallucinations or if you're getting any content that seems to be inaccurate.
Great, thank you. And this attendee mentioned that she's using a specific customer. Oops, sorry. You mentioned using specific customer language. Are you saying we can ask AI to respond with a more esoteric dictionary or lexicon? If so, that would be amazing to know how to do that.
Yes, you can. So you can do it in a couple ways. So depending on the LLM that you are leveraging, you can specifically ask for different types of styles or different types of language or dictionaries. You can do those things. You can also, if you have within your source documentation, so we showed the example of source documentation. So within the source documentation, if you have style guides, if you have specific language, whether that be your internal language, customer language, whether that be part of your win themes or the information that you have there. So anything that you have, say a style guide, for instance, that you want to apply, you can use that as source documentation when you are creating any kind of document or content and request that it match style. Now, again, with an LLM, everything isn't always can't be guaranteed to be 100%. But yes, using source documentation along with prompting will allow you to match tone and style.
Great. A good segue into our next question. Is it helpful to use LLMs and AI if answers to governments/public procurement have to be 100% correct and reproducible? Can we achieve this with AI?
No. So you can create content. If you were talking about creating content that then you were going to assess for, relevance and accuracy and all of those types of things, it would be a combination of things. So it would be a combination of creating content and then using something that's more deterministic. So if you look at generative AI, sort of the flip side of that coin is, deterministic technology, which is going to tell you this is exactly what I'm looking for. This is exactly what I need to find every time. And I can guarantee with 100% certainty that I'm going to find that every time. And the process is repeatable. So you could combine the two, but ultimately, no. Using an LLM to generate content, if you're looking for a process that's repeatable or you're asking questions about, risk language or specific contractual limitations or contractual assurances, those types of things can't be guaranteed 100%.
Great, thank you. And how do you source the data for the audit? Is that from the auditor notes or general internet search?
Oh, for the example that I showed?
Yes.
Yeah, so that information was contained within the LLM. So the large language model that we use, so VisibleThread is an LLM agnostic platform. So ultimately, we can connect with any LLM. So if our customers have proprietary LLMs, we can connect with those, or any open source LLM that you choose. The LLM that we use is called Mistral Nemo, and that is just right now the open source LLM that we're using. Depending on the responses that we're getting, depending on the accuracy, we have changed those out from time to time. But the platform works with any LLM that's relevant to a customer. I say that just to give you an idea of where that information came from. So the first section, when I created the report, that was just general information contained within the LLM. So based on likely because that power station, all of their audit reports and information are public facing. An LLM is kind of a capture of the internet at a point in time. So that information was contained within. You'll see the same thing using LLM for competitive positioning or market assessment or something like that. You'll be able to find pretty detailed information in LLM. In the second version, where we looked at the expansion on the safety section, that was using reference content. So I did pull from the government website the specific audit reports and safety plans, and I used that information as context information, and that's where that information came from. So that's just the difference between the two. One is using the LLM generally, the other is I'm using source documentation to pull that I know likely contains these types of things, and I know is accurate because I'm pulling, the last 6 audit reports and the current safety plan and current emergency preparedness plan for this specific facility, and then asking content to be built around that. So it can be a combination of both.
Wonderful. And for our last question of the day, do you have any recommendations for outputs with word counts? This user has played around with word counts in Copilot and it never gets it right. Could you give me a prompt that will work, please? I have used rewrite in 500 words or less, or any of your recommendations or best practices for niche recommendations like that.
Yeah, so generally, I think what you're going to find is that is dependent on the platform that you're using. Some are a little better than others. Word count is something that is one of those things in the bucket that you can't guarantee. That we just can't guarantee that you're going to get an accurate response. And the recommendation is just like you're saying, rewrite in 500 words or less, or create a plan. You saw I just did the audit report and I said I wanted 2,500 words or less. The first pass came in at 2498 or something like that. So I think it really just depends on the platform. Some are more accurate than others when it comes to word count. I'd be happy to talk offline if that person would like to follow up with me on recommendations. But yeah, it is a little bit of a tricky one because there is no silver bullet for that. And you're not doing anything wrong with that type of prompting, but there are some different things you could consider.
Wonderful. Allison, thank you so much again for such an incredible presentation. Thank you again for your time. A reminder that by registering for this webinar, you will receive a post-webinar email, which will include our webinar feedback and any resources our speaker would like to share with you. To our attendees, the recording of this webinar will be available on APMP TV shortly. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Oh no.